And every day, I practice martial arts.
So anyway, I thought we'd go today. Let's kind of go over the different videos and see if I've learned anything or changed my opinion on any of those things.
Okay, well, the Grandmaster video.
Oh, God,
This
yes.
was a bit of a controversial video, right?
It was. And so I did this video on like Grandmasters and what does it mean or whatever. Ends up that's actually I think the most watched video in the entire channel. I think still has way more views than like our best Kung Fu Genius podcast episode yet.
People love controversy.
People love controversy. That's actually one of the things that I've learned since doing this, right? Yeah. It's like if I do a deep dive on history, on like the tournaments or anything that I find super interesting, it's like it's like crickets chirping. Okay?
Cookie.
But the moment I go like, yo, man, let me tell you the real story of Fight Quest and what a jerk off this producer was. People love that because they like the fighting stuff, right? I mean, like the bickering. The bickering, right? And it's like, yeah, that's definitely part of it. And when it comes to bickering and politics and all this stuff, man, I got stories for days. But I don't want to make a podcast that's just about like, oh, let me tell you about what Sifu Leung Ting's beef was with this guy, or let me tell you about how this Kung Fu guy hated that Kung Fu guy, because if I have to start doing that solely for views, then I feel like I'm starting to lose my mission a little bit, right? And so I'd rather get
away from yourself.
Yeah,
okay.
I'd rather get some fewer views than to like go in that total sensational route, right? So I basically did this video because the main audience are a lot of my Kung Fu brethren, specifically in the WT line in Europe, because obviously one of the things that Leung Ting Wing Chun gets let's say a little bit of pushback against is like, you know, Sifu Leung Ting's use of the title Grandmaster or Great Grandmaster and stuff like that. And I, who have to remind people that I left Sifu Leung Ting's organization 10 years ago, I may teach his Kung Fu, but my organization is not set up the way his is. And I don't value a lot of those kind of distinctions the same way they do, right? So I have I feel a slightly more modern look at that. I don't really believe in the title. I don't believe the title Grandmaster should really be used anymore. I believe the people who legitimately have it, for me, they're the last generation.
Okay, let them keep it.
I think the title should end with them.
Gotcha.
All right? Because the title Grandmaster is a bit anachronistic. It doesn't really have any meaning anymore. When you have so many people who are Grandmasters, then it loses its meaning a little bit, right?
Okay.
In my opinion. Because especially we live in the age of MMA and modern martial arts. And bickering about some ridiculous title of Grandmaster and who's a Grandmaster and what this means we're having conversations about unimportant stuff right now. Wing Chun people need to have conversations about how to deal with double leg takedowns and how to deal with the solid boxer and how to improve the teaching method so that Wing Chun can be upgraded for the modern day, and stop talking about who learned what from whom, how traditional and, unchanged their Wing Chun is, because this stuff is completely irrelevant. And the title of Grandmaster for me is a little bit like that. And so in that video, I talked a little bit about, there are actually two titles in Chinese which loosely mean Grandmaster. One is Zheong Munyan. Zheong Munyan means the head of a style. And the other one is Zhongxi, which is a slightly more generic term for Grandmaster, like a great master, someone of high achievement.
Okay.
And so Zheong Munyan, which is usually like the person who is the successor of a style. Well, this doesn't exist anymore, because Grandmaster Yip Man taught so many students that all have their own line and their own lineage. You might have a successor within a specific lineage, but that doesn't mean anything in the greater martial arts world, because it only means something specifically for that school or that line.
Okay,
so I feel that
got out so broad.
It's so broad that unless we're talking about a rare style in China, which was never taught commercially, the term successor is meaningless. There is no more successor to Wing Chun. There was no successor to Wing Chun after Grandmaster Yip Man passed away, period. Wow. So for people now, 40, 50 years later, to now still want to use that term wasn't even legitimate in the 70s anymore, right? Yeah. So I kind of talk about that a little bit, but I take aim at people in the WT line who left the Leung Ting organization and gave themselves the gold stripes, which for people outside of the WT line, this is probably very meaningless, right? But the gold stripes mean that you are a grandmaster within the WT line. And, for the longest time, only Sifu Leung Ting wore those because he was the head of his own style. And then so now I have many Sihengs in Germany usually who broke away, did their own thing. And then what was the first thing they did? They put gold stripes on themselves. And so the problem is, there's a funny statistic about Italians. It's not just the Germans, but Italian WT people. Italy has per capita the most number of self-proclaimed WT gold stripe wearing grandmasters of all of Europe. Wow. It's insane. I get friend requests on a weekly basis from some dude wearing gold stripes who calls himself Grandmaster, whom I've never heard of before, right? And so my video kind of took aim at that, right? And I did not actually call out anyone specifically, although I did use the photo of one person who gave himself the gold stripes.
With his gold stripes on.
Yeah, and the thumbnail, but I didn't even show his head or whatever, right? But my video wasn't calling him out in particular. It was calling out that behavior of giving yourself this kind of distinction when I said, I don't even think the distinction is important. You can be commercially successful without calling yourself Grandmaster, without putting gold stripes on. Like, these things are meaningless. No one joins anyone's school because they go, well, I was looking at 2 WT schools. All right, this one, really good classes. Instructor's really good, but he's only got red stripes.
No, he's not a Grandmaster.
But on the other side of town, there's another schedule isn't as good, but that guy's got gold stripes. I'm going to go over there and learn from that. This decision has never been made in the history of the world ever. But in the perception of these people, they're like, oh, yeah. But when everyone knows that everyone gave themselves these gold stripes at some point, then what's the distinction? What's the distinction, right? You make a name for yourself when you focus on teaching your students. Yeah. You don't make a name for yourself by putting gold stripes on your pants and now thinking that these dudes cannot even order tea in Hong Kong, all right? But they're like, yeah, I'm pretty much at the same level as Sifu Leung-Ting from the 1970s. Yeah, maybe you could beat him up. Maybe you're a better fighter. But if it's all about who the best fighter is, then it doesn't matter how much you know. And the presumption is that if you're calling yourself a Grandmaster, it's not just about you being a badass fighter. It's about you actually knowing something. And you got dudes who can't order tea in Hong Kong. Dude, they can't even ask for the check. Check please in Chinese. Yeah. They can't even do that. But they want you to believe that they are on the same par as people who understand Wing Chun from a Chinese cultural perspective. It's insane, right? And so anyway, one of these guys took aim at me, right? We'll call him, me, I always like to come up with names for people. This isn't his name, but we'll call him Morty Dorgon, okay? All right, let's just call him Morty Dorgon, right? Dude got really upset, and he basically had a public meltdown in my comments. Yeah. And he didn't realize that.
Remember this.
Yes, and the funny thing is, one, I wasn't even talking about him specifically. And then he outed himself basically as one of these guys who gave himself the gold stripes because he put his name out there, right? And then all of a sudden, no one knew who this dude was, and no one would have known that he's one of these guys until he outed. And dude, he got savaged in the comments. Like I remember someone said, imagine telling on yourself like this, right? And everyone, and of course his English isn't that good, so he's just getting ripped and he cannot hang because he doesn't really understand what these people are saying, right? He ended up deleting his comments, right? But then he threatened that he was going to sue me because he doesn't understand how YouTube fair use works. And so he threatened to sue me. Yeah. And he got somebody on Facebook, like someone who was a mutual friend, and be like, hey, I just want you to know from peer to peer, you should probably take that down because he's contacting a big lawyer in New York. And I'm going like, okay, so a German is going to sue an American on the freedom of speech issue? First of all, I don't even mention his name, right? And what you also see is how fragile someone's ego is, right? If you are on YouTube, if you're on Instagram, if you're a Wing Chun instructor and you put your name out there, you have to be able to take some heat. There are people out there.
Yeah, be ready for the
heat. They talk ish about me.
Yeah.
Sometimes you remember my old Howcast series?
I do.
Yeah. There was a video, somebody commented yo, I want to see this guy fight Tito Ortiz. Tito Ortiz would choke this bitch out, right? I thought that was the funniest freaking comment ever, okay? But you have to imagine, talking about me. That. Yeah, somebody's like, yo, Tito Ortiz will choke this bitch out. Talking about me, right? I read that. I thought that was
probably still there in the comments, just sitting
probably
chilling.
Somewhere in one of those videos. I thought that was funny, right?
Yeah.
But then you realize I talk about something like maybe giving yourself the gold stripes isn't the most culturally correct thing. And this guy, he starts like, I'm going to beat you up. I want to fight. Here's the funny thing. If he came over to my school and beat me up, he's still wrong about wearing yellow stripes. It actually doesn't solve it. The fact that it's like, oh, so you think you're some kind of tough fighter, so that means that your bizarre appropriation of Chinese culture that you don't understand is going to be correct because you can physically punch someone in the face, which I'm not entirely convinced he can anyway. You know what I mean? And it's like, but it's so like, you just see how fragile these guys' babies' egos are, right? And then he's like, he contacts a lawyer, and I thought it was so funny because one, this idiot doesn't realize my wife is a lawyer. Okay? It's like, and I didn't say any of this stuff, and I go, oh, he contacted a lawyer? Oh my God. A lawyer in New York? Wow, that's big boy stuff for a German guy, right? And this other guy who knows Morty Drogron, he said like, yo, you should probably take that down. He's contacting a lawyer in New York. I'm like, it's okay, man. Don't worry about it, right?
No sweat.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's a freedom of speech issue, right? And so no judge will see this. Like, it was so ridiculous. Plus, this dude has no idea.
Out of court.
As a German, do you know how much it's going to cost for you to sue me in a New York court? Do you know how much? Do you know what an hourly rate is for a lawyer? Please, I would love to see this, right? But I'll tell you, this was around February of last year, so about a year ago. And then the dude is so petty, all right? He ends up not pursuing the lawsuit, but then he created the pandemic trying to shut me down, man. What a jerk, man. How petty. Yeah, he created it, right? He's like, all right, I know how I'm going to stop that guy, right? Okay, what an idiot. Yeah.
He did something, yeah.
Well, I mean, for me, it's like, look, how can you be a Kung Fu instructor in the age of MMA and not have a sense of humor about this stuff, right? If someone wants to make fun of me or they don't like how I do, that's fine. We are the old school cats doing Chinese Kung Fu in the age of MMA. You need to have a sense of humor about yourself.
It out, you gotta know how
to and if you're taking yourself seriously in the age of MMA, like, oh yeah, you people are looking at you doing your 8-8 combination movement or whatever and going like, yeah, if you don't have a sense of humor about this stuff. And don't get me wrong, dude, I love Wing Tsun. I love teaching Wing Tsun. I love developing Wing Tsun. I love practicing Wing Tsun. This is my world. But I also realize that, you know, Wing Tsun has a bit of an image issue and it's up to us to salvage it. And we don't salvage it by crying because someone made fun of the stripes on our pants. All right? So anyway, this is about all I got to say about that one right there.
Man. Oh, man.